The great ship of the aliens, the Zarathi, hung in the dark space next to the human ship. It was called the Claw of Glory, the name fit. The ship was all sharp angles and dark metal, looking like a weapon ready to strike. Next to it, the human ship Odyssey seemed small and smooth and quiet. Inside the Odyssey, the air felt heavy. A meeting was happening. It was the important meeting between humans and Zorathi. The Zorathi were a race of large, wolf-like people. They were covered in thick fur with long muzzles filled with sharp teeth. Their eyes were intelligent, but they held a fire that was wild and proud. They valued strength above all else. To them, being strong was everything. Being the biggest, the fastest, the most fierce. This was what gave you respect. For the Zorathi, the leader of their pack was called the Alpha. The current Alpha was a massive Zorathi named KL. He was old, but you could not call him weak. Scars covered his face and shoulders, each one telling a story of a fight he had won. When he walked, the other Zorathi moved aside. His voice was a low growl that seemed to make the very floor shake. But today, all eyes were not just on Kale. They were on the younger Zorathi walking just a step behind him. This was Rin. Rin was Kale's successor. This meant that one day when Kale was too old or was defeated, Rin would become the new Alpha. Rin was everything a Zorathi should be. He was tall and strong, his muscles moving smoothly under his gray and black fur. He held his head high and his yellow eyes scanned every room, every human, as if judging them, measuring their strength. He was the pride of their people, the future. The human crew of the Odyssey tried to act normal, but it was hard. Captain Lee was a serious woman who always followed the rules. She stood straight and spoke with a calm voice, but her hands were clasped tightly behind her back. She knew how important this meeting was. If it went well, humans and Zorathi could share knowledge, could trade, could be allies. If it went badly, the powerful Zorathi could become dangerous enemies. The tour of the human ship was part of the meeting. The Zorathi walked through the clean, bright halls of the Odyssey. They looked at the human technology with curious but slightly dismissive eyes. To them, human things seemed too soft, too quiet. They saw no challenge here. Then they came to the hydroponics bay. This was the part of the ship where the humans grew their plants. The air in here was different. It was warm and moist and smelled of dirt and green living things. Lights that looked like a small sun shone down on rows and rows of plants. There were tall plants with wide leaves, small bushes with colorful flowers, and even trays of simple green grass. The Zorathi did not like it. One of them sneezed. Another shook his head, his ears twitching at the strange, quiet sounds. Kale let out a soft grunt. "You spend your energy on things that do not fight back," he said to Captain Lee. His tone was not mean, just stating a fact. To a Zorathi, a thing that could not fight was not very interesting. Captain Lee nodded politely. "These plants give us air to breathe and food to eat. They are peaceful." Peaceful. Kale repeated the word as if it were a strange taste in his mouth. Rin, standing beside him, sniffed the air. His nose wrinkled. But his eyes were also curious. He looked at a large flowering bush with purple blooms. It was so different from the cold metal of his own ship. The group moved on, talking about air filtration and water recycling. The bay was large, with many twisting paths between the plant beds. The sounds of the group, the heavy footsteps of the Zorathi, the calm voice of Captain Lee, began to fade as they turned a corner. Rin did not follow. He had seen a flicker of movement deeper in the bay. A small, six-legged creature like an insect had landed on a broad leaf. It was a simple thing, but for a moment Rin's hunter instinct had kicked in. He took a silent step off the main path, then another. He peered through the dense leaves, his body low to the ground. The insect flew away. Rin let out a small huff of disappointment, but then he just stayed there. The noise of the others was gone. The only sounds were the gentle hum of the growth lights and the soft rustle of leaves. The air was warm. The light was a gentle yellow. It was so quiet. On his ship there was always noise. The clang of metal, the growls of training fights, the low rumble of the engines. Here there was none of that. For Rin, every moment of his life was about being strong. He had to train harder, fight smarter, and act tougher than anyone else. He had to be ready to lead. He had to be worthy of being the successor. The weight of it was always on him, like a heavy cloak he could never take off. The other young Zorathi watched him, waiting for him to show a moment of weakness. The older ones watched him, judging if he was strong enough. But here, in this green, quiet place, no one was watching him. No one expected anything from him. He was just Rin. He slowly sat down, the cool floor feeling good. He leaned his big head against a large container holding a small tree. He closed his eyes for just a moment. He just wanted a minute of peace. Just 1 minute where he did not have to be the future Alpha. Back on the bridge of the Odyssey, the official part of the meeting was ending. Captain Lee was preparing to say goodbye to Alpha Kale. It had been a successful, if tense, first step. It was then that a low growl started among the Zarathi. Rin was missing. At first, they were not worried. He has wandered off to explore, one of Kale's guards said. Perhaps he found a challenge. They thought maybe he had found a human to intimidate or a part of the ship to claim. But minutes passed, and Rin did not return. The calm on the Zarathi side vanished. Kale's friendly growl turned into a snarl of anger. His fur bristled, making him look even bigger. His yellow eyes locked onto Captain Lee. "Where is my successor?" he demanded, his voice booming in the quiet room. Captain Lee felt a cold knot form in her stomach. "I am sure he is just curious about our ship. We will find him immediately," she gave the order. A ship-wide alert was sent out. All crew were to look for the missing Zarathi heir. The mood on the Odyssey changed from calm to panic in seconds. On the view screen, the claw of glory seemed to grow larger, more threatening. A new voice came over the comms, deep and angry. It was the commander of the Zarathi ship. "If any harm comes to the Successor," the voice growled, "it will be considered an act of war." Captain Lee looked from the angry face of Alpha Kale to the threatening shape of the claw of glory outside her window. The future of two species, which had seemed so bright just an hour ago, now rested on finding one lost, young alien in the maze of her ship, and she had no idea where he was. The alarm blared through the ship, a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the normal hum of the engines. Red lights flashed in the corridors, painting the white walls in pulses of emergency. Crew members, who moments before had been going about their normal jobs, now moved with quick, urgent steps. Their voices were low and serious as they checked rooms and opened storage lockers. The message from the bridge was clear and simple. The Zarathi Successor was missing. Find him. The unspoken part of the message hung in the air, heavy and frightening. If they did not find him, there would be war. Captain Lee stood on the bridge, her face like stone. She watched the main screen, which showed the Zarathi dreadnought. It looked even bigger and more dangerous now. She could feel the anger coming from the other ship. On the viewer screen in her office, Alpha Kale was still there, his image frozen as the communication line was silent. He had refused to return to his ship. He stood in the meeting room, a tower of fur and fury, surrounded by his own guards. He was waiting. His patience was a thin thread ready to snap. Min, the communications officer, sat at her station. Her fingers flew over the screen, pulling up maps of the ship and lists of crew locations. She was looking for any clue, any strange reading. The internal sensors were good, but they were made to find humans, not a large, warm-blooded alien who might not want to be found. She saw lots of little dots representing the crew, all moving quickly, but nothing that looked like a Zarathi. "He is not in the main corridors," she said to the captain, her voice calm but tight. "The life support readings are normal. No doors have been forced open." Captain Lee nodded. "He has to be somewhere. Expand the search to all non-essential areas. Engineering bays, storage, even the maintenance tunnels." The search parties reported in one by one. Their voices crackled over the ship's comms. "Search Team 1, no sign in the crew quarters. Search Team 2, mess hall and recreation decks are clear. Engineering reports all secure." Each report made the knot in Captain Lee's stomach tighten. The Odyssey was a big ship, but it was not that big. Where could he have gone? Deep in the ship, far from the noise and the running, was the xenobotany lab. This was Jin's place. He was a botanist, a scientist who studied plants. While the rest of the ship was made of metal and plastic, his lab was full of life. The air here was warm and carried the smell of wet soil and green leaves. The light was a soft white, coming from lamps that helped the plants grow. Jin had heard the alarm. He knew what it meant. But his work was delicate. He was studying a new type of moss from a distant moon. It needed careful attention. He decided that the best thing he could do was stay in his lab and not get in the way of the searchers. He moved slowly between the plant beds, checking the water levels and the light. He was a quiet man who liked quiet things. The chaos of the search felt loud and far away. He finished with the moss and walked over to a large tray where he was growing simple grass from earth. It was a comfort to him, a little piece of home. He needed to check the soil moisture. That was when he saw it. In the corner of the lab, tucked behind a large pot holding a small Terran oak tree, was a shadow that was too big and too dark to be a plant. Jin stopped moving. He looked closer. It was the Zorathi Successor. Rin. He was curled into a tight ball, his body pressed into the corner. His great head was tucked down, hidden by his large front legs. His impressive size seemed smaller like this, folded in on itself. But Jin could see the subtle shake in his shoulders. He could see the way the fur on his back quivered. This was not a fierce predator. This was not a proud leader in training. This was a young creature who was deeply, terribly scared. Jin's first thought was to call the bridge, to report his find. That was the rule. That was what Captain Lee would want. But he did not move. He watched the trembling form of the young alien. He thought about the Zorathi he had seen on the screen earlier. So proud, so strong, so loud. He thought about the pressure of being the best, the one chosen to lead. He looked at Rin hiding in the one place on the ship that was soft and alive, and he understood. Not everything, but enough. He made a decision. Jin did not reach for his comm. He did not make a sudden sound. Instead, he very slowly sat down on the floor where he was standing. He made sure he was a good distance away, giving the young alien space. He did not look directly at Rin, as that could feel like a challenge. Instead, he picked up his data slate from a nearby table and pretended to read. He began to hum. It was a simple, old tune his grandmother had taught him, a song with no words, just a soft, rolling melody. He kept his movements small and his breathing even. He was trying to be like the plants around him, calm, peaceful, and not a threat. For a long time, nothing changed. The only sounds were the hum of the growth lamps and Jin's soft humming. The alarm was still blaring elsewhere, but in here it was muffled. Then a shift. One of Rin's ears, which had been flat against his head, twitched. It turned slightly, just enough to catch the sound of the humming. The trembling in his body lessened, just a little. Jin saw the movement from the corner of his eye but did not stop humming. He slowly reached for a small cup he used for watering seedlings. He filled it with water from a dispenser and then, moving with slow, clear motions, he slid the cup across the floor. It stopped about halfway between them. He went back to his data slate and his humming. Minutes ticked by. Then very slowly Rin's head lifted. His yellow eyes were wide, the pupils big. They were not fierce now. They were full of a nervous fear. He looked at Jin, then at the cup of water. He looked back at Jin, who was still not looking at him, still humming. With a movement so slow it was barely visible, Rin uncurled a little. He stretched his neck forward, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. He sniffed towards the cup. Then, in a quick, quiet motion, he leaned forward and lapped at the water once, twice. He drank the whole cup. He did not curl back up into a ball. He rested his head on his paws, his eyes still watching Jin. The fear in them was now mixed with a deep, tired confusion. Jin gave a small, gentle smile, still not looking directly at him. "It's okay," he said, his voice as soft as his humming. "You're okay here." He did not know if the alien understood the words, but he hoped he understood the tone. The sound of a voice that was not shouting, not demanding, not challenging. The sound of a voice that was just calm. Outside the lab, the search was becoming more desperate. Captain Lee was now talking to Alpha Kale, trying to keep him calm. Min was still searching the sensor logs, her brow furrowed in concentration. But inside the xenobotany lab, a strange and fragile peace had settled. A human sat on the floor, humming to himself, and a lost Zorathi heir, who was supposed to be the future of his people, watched him, listening to the quiet, and for the first, Time in a long time, he began to feel just a little bit safe. The chaos on the Odyssey was getting worse. Captain Lee's voice came over the ship's comms, calm but firm, asking for updates. The search teams were getting tired and frustrated. They had looked everywhere they could think of. The Zorathi on the ship, Alpha Kale and his guards, were growing more restless and angry with every passing minute. The low growls from the meeting room could be heard out in the hallway. Min sat at her station, ignoring the noise around her. She was focused on her screens.
She had an idea.
The internal sensors tracked movement and life signs, but they were not perfect. A large, non-human life form might not show up clearly, especially if it was not moving much. She decided to look at the data differently. She pulled up a log of all the doors that had been opened and closed in the last hour. She scanned the list, her eyes moving quickly. Most of the doors were in busy areas. Crew quarters, mess hall, engineering. Then she saw it. A single automatic door leading to the xenobotany sector. It had opened once, about 5 minutes after the Zorathi tour had passed through that part of the ship. It had not opened again since. No one had gone in or out. That was strange. The botanist Jin was assigned to that lab. He should have been in there. But the door sensor said it was empty, or it said there was only one human life sign inside. Jin. The system was not registering anything else. But why had the door opened and then not been used again? Maybe it was a malfunction. Or maybe something, or someone had gone in and the system had not properly logged it. She pulled up the security camera feed for the hallway outside the botany lab. The video was not great. It was a low-priority area, but she could see the blurry shape of a large, four-legged creature moving quickly past the camera and slipping through the door just as it opened. It was only a second, but it was enough. It was him. Min did not call out. She did not alert the security teams. She had seen the way the Zorathi acted. If a group of humans in uniforms rushed into that room, weapons ready, it would be a disaster. The young Zorathi would feel threatened. He might attack. Or the Zorathi guards would see it as an aggressive move. It would be a mess. She stood up quietly and walked over to Captain Lee. She spoke in a low voice so the others could not hear. "Captain, I think I know where he is." Captain Lee turned, her eyes tired but sharp. "Where?" "The xenobotany lab. Sector 7 Gamma. The door sensor shows an entry, but the life sign scanner only shows Jin inside. I checked the hallway camera. It was him. He went in there and never came out." Captain Lee's shoulders relaxed just a little. A location. Finally. "Good work, Min. I'll dispatch a security team to secure the area." "Captain," Min said quickly, her voice still low, "I recommend a quiet approach. If we scare him, it could go very badly. Let me go. I know Jin. I can assess the situation first. No loud noises, no weapons," the captain thought for a moment. She looked at Min's calm face, then back at the main screen showing the Zorathi ship. She nodded. "Go, be careful. And Min, report back the moment you know something. We are running out of time." Min left the bridge and walked quickly through the ship. The flashing red lights and the alarm were still going. But she tried to shut them out. She needed to be calm. She took the lift down to Sector 7. The halls here were quieter. This was a science and research area, not a place for crews. She reached the door to the xenobotany lab. She did not open it. Next to the door was a small, clear viewport. It was meant to let people look in without disturbing the plants. She moved to the side and peered through the glass. What she saw made her freeze. She expected to see Jin held hostage, or maybe Jin trying to talk to a dangerous, angry alien. She expected a standoff. That was not what she saw. The lab was peaceful. The soft white growth lights glowed from above. The plants were still and green, and in the middle of it all, sitting on the floor with his back against a large plant container, was Jin. He had his data slate in his hand, and he was reading from it in a soft, steady voice. He was talking about root systems and soil pH levels. It was the most boring thing Min could imagine. And there, stretched out on the floor beside him, was the Zorathi successor, Rin. He was not tied up. He was not threatening anyone. He was lying on his side, his large body taking up a lot of the floor space. His head, with its long muzzle and sharp teeth, was resting right on top of Jin's scuffed brown work boot. His eyes were half closed, and his chest rose and fell in the slow, deep rhythm of sleep. One of his ears twitched now and then, but he was clearly deeply asleep. Min stared, unable to fully believe what her eyes were showing her. The creature that had caused a panic across the whole ship, the being that could start a war, was using a human's boot as a pillow. Jin looked up from his data slate. His eyes met Min's through the viewport. He did not jump. He did not look scared or guilty. He looked calm. He saw the shock on her face. Very slowly, so as not to disturb the sleeping alien, he raised his hand. He brought one finger up to his lips in the ancient universal signal for silence. Min nodded slowly, her mind racing. She understood now why Jin had not called it in. This was not a situation you could explain over the comms. This was something you had to see. She looked at Rin's peaceful sleeping face. This was not a dangerous predator. This was just tired. She knew she had to report to the captain, but she also knew that the moment she did, this quiet moment would be shattered. The Zarathi would storm in. They would see this scene. Would they see the peace? Or would they only see what looked like weakness? She took one last look. Jin had gone back to reading his data slate, his voice a soft murmur. The great Zarathi beast slept on, comforted by the sound and the presence of the quiet human. Min turned and walked a few steps away from the door. She pressed her comm link. "Captain," she said, her voice low. "Min, report, do you have him?" "I have a visual," Min said carefully. "The Successor is in the xenobotany lab with Jin. He is secure. He is not a threat. Is Jin okay? Is he being held?" "No, Captain," Min said. She took a breath, trying to find the right words. "It's not like that. The Successor, he's asleep." There was a long silence on the other end of the comm. "Asleep?" Captain Lee finally said, her voice full of disbelief. "Yes, Captain, asleep. On Jin's foot." Min knew how crazy it sounded. "Sir, I don't think we should send a security team. The situation is stable. It's fragile. If we rush in, we might scare him. He might panic." Another long silence. Min could almost hear the captain thinking, weighing the risks. "Understood," the captain said, her voice tight. "Maintain your position. Do not, I repeat, do not engage. I will inform Alpha Kale that his successor has been located and is safe." Min leaned against the wall outside the lab door. The alarm was still blaring. The ship was still on high alert. But in this one small part of the universe, there was a strange and powerful kind of peace. And it was all because one quiet man had chosen to be kind instead of being loud. She hoped it would be enough. The wait was over. On the bridge, Captain Lee had told Alpha Kale that his successor was found. She said he was safe and unharmed. She did not say he was asleep. Kale did not care for details. A low, rumbling sound of impatience had been building in his chest for the last hour. Now it burst out. "Take me to him," Kale growled. It was not a request. Captain Lee knew she could not refuse. She led the way, her back straight. Behind her, Kale moved like a storm. His heavy footsteps echoed in the hallways. His 4 guards followed him, their claws clicking on the metal floor. Their yellow eyes scanned every corner, every human they passed, with deep suspicion. The humans shrank back from them, their faces pale. Min saw them coming. She was still standing outside the lab door. She quickly spoke into her comm. "Captain, they are coming." "They are moving fast. Understood. Stand aside, Min. Do not try to stop them." Min stepped away from the door, pressing herself against the wall. The group arrived. Captain Lee looked at Min, who gave a small, quick nod. Yes, he was still in there. The situation was the same. Kale did not even look at them. His focus was on the door. He could smell his successor now. The familiar scent was mixed with the strange green smells of this human place. It made him angry. What had these soft humans done to Rin? "Open it," Kyle snarled. Captain Lee entered the code. The door slid open with a quiet hiss. The scene that met their eyes was so strange, so completely unexpected, that for a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The lab was a pocket of perfect calm. The air was warm and smelled of life. The growth lights shone down like a gentle sun. And there, in the middle of the room, sitting on the floor as if he had all the time in the world, was the human botanist, Jin. He had a data slate in his hand. He was not looking at the door. He was looking at the large, furry head that rested on his boot. It was Rin. He was lying on his side, his body relaxed. His chest rose and fell in the deep, slow rhythm of true sleep. One of his ears twitched, but he did not wake up. He looked peaceful. He looked safe. Kale stood in the doorway, his massive body blocking the light from the hall. His brain, a mind made for battle and dominance, could not understand what he was seeing. This was not a fight. This was not a trap. This was not his proud successor showing strength. This was stillness. This was quiet. It was a language he did not speak. The silence broke. The sound of the door and the presence of so many people finally disturbed Rin's sleep. He stirred. A soft grumbling sound came from his throat, a sound of someone not wanting to wake up. He slowly opened his eyes. He blinked. The world was blurry. He saw the green leaves above him. He felt the solid warmth of the human's leg under his head. He felt more rested than he had in years. Then his eyes focused on the doorway. He saw his sire. He saw Alpha Kale, the leader of their people, standing there. He saw the anger and the confusion on his face. He saw the guards, their bodies tense and ready for a fight. Every lesson of his life screamed at him. He should jump up. He should stand tall. He should show his strength and explain himself. He should never be seen in a position like this, looking weak, looking vulnerable. But the feeling of the quiet room was still wrapped around him. The memory of the human's calm voice was in his ears. The weight of his constant duty felt heavier than ever before. He did not want to put that weight back on, so he did something that shocked everyone in the room, especially himself. He saw the anger in his sire's eyes. He saw the confusion, and instead of leaping to his feet, he let out a soft, sighing breath. He turned his head slightly. He nuzzled his muzzle deeper into the worn leather of Jin's boot. It was a clear, deliberate gesture. It was not a gesture of submission to a human. It was a gesture of trust. It was him saying, in the only way he knew how, that he felt safe here, that he was not ready to leave this peace. The movement was small, but in the silent room it was like a thunderclap. Kyle took a sharp breath. His guards shifted, their growls dying in their throats. They looked from their sleeping successor to the unarmed human and back to their alpha. They did not know what to do. Captain Lee held her breath. This was the moment. This was when everything could break. Jin, who had been still this whole time, finally moved. He slowly looked up from Rin and met Kale's gaze. His face was not scared. It was calm. He saw the storm in the old alpha's eyes, but he did not look away. He was not stolen, Jin said. His voice was quiet, but it was clear and firm in the quiet room. It cut through the tension. He was not tricked. He was tired. Jin looked down at the young Zarathi, who had closed his eyes again, seeking comfort in the simple contact. He sought a place where he did not have to be strong for a moment. Jin looked back at Kale, his eyes honest. We all need such a place. Kyle stared at Jin. He looked at the human's hands, which held no weapons. He looked at his eyes, which held no fear and no challenge. He looked at his successor, Rin, who was choosing to rest in the presence of this strange, soft creature. The anger in Kale's chest began to change. It did not disappear, but it mixed with something else, a deep, slow understanding. He had spent his whole life fighting. He had taught Rin that strength was everything. But here was a different kind of strength. It was not the strength of claws and teeth. It was the strength of a quiet room. It was the strength to offer peace without asking for anything in return. He had come here ready for a battle. He had found a sanctuary instead. The great Alpha Kale, leader of the Zarathi, let out a long, slow breath. The fight seemed to drain out of him. He looked at Rin, truly looked at him. He saw not a weakling, but a young one who was carrying a heavy burden. A burden he, Kale, had helped to place there. He gave a single, sharp nod to his guards. They relaxed their stance, their confusion clear, but their obedience absolute. Without another word, Kale turned. He walked out of the room, his footsteps now quieter than before. The guards followed him. The confrontation was over. The Zarathi left the Odyssey that day. There were no more angry words. There was no threat of war. The great dreadnought, the Claw of Glory, moved away from the human ship and disappeared into the darkness of space. The silence it left behind was heavy with meaning. On the bridge of the Odyssey, the crew slowly returned to their normal work. The red alert lights were turned off. The alarm was silenced. The quiet hum of the ship's systems felt loud again. Captain Lee stood on her bridge, looking out at the stars where the alien ship had been. She felt a deep tiredness. It was the tiredness that comes not from hard work, but from a crisis that had been avoided by a thread. She thought about the scene in the botany lab. She thought about Jin sitting on the floor. She thought about the powerful young alien using his boot as a pillow. She thought about the anger on Alpha Kale's face changing into something else. Something like understanding. The official reports were filed. They said the situation was resolved peacefully, but Captain Lee knew that the truth was much stranger than any report could explain. The future of human and Zarathi relations had not been saved by a great diplomat or a strong soldier. It had been saved by a quiet botanist and his simple kindness. Weeks passed. The Odyssey continued its journey. Life on the ship returned to normal. But a change had happened. A new message came from the Zarathi High Council. It was not a challenge. It was an invitation. They wanted to talk about sharing knowledge. They wanted to learn about human science, about human medicine, and in a strange request, they asked for information about human botany. It seemed the story of what happened had spread among the Zarathi. The story of the Successor who was found not in a fight, but in a garden. The story of the human who did not fight or fear, but simply offered water and a quiet place to rest. A new word began to appear in the translations of Zarathi language. It was a human word they had borrowed. The word was sanctuary. It did not have a direct match in their own growling language. Their words were for hunting grounds, for battle arenas, for places of challenge. They had no word for a place where you could put down your burdens and just be. Now they did. For the Zarathi, it was a new idea. A revolutionary idea. Strength was still everything. But perhaps there was a strength in knowing when to rest. Perhaps the mightiest pack was not the one that fought the most, but the one whose members were so strong, they could afford to be weak sometimes. They could afford to seek a sanctuary. On the Zarathi homeworld, Rin walked beside his sire, Kale. The old alpha was quieter now. He still led with strength and power, but he also watched his successor more carefully. He saw the weight the young one carried. He began to understand that constant challenge was not the only way to build strength. Sometimes, strength could be built in quiet moments. Rin himself had changed. He was still a fierce fighter. He was still proud to be the future alpha, but he carried himself differently. The constant tension in his shoulders was gone. He had learned a secret that none of the other young Zarathi knew. He knew what it felt like to lay his head down and sleep without fear. He knew the sound of a calm voice. He knew that in all the universe there was at least one place, even if it was far away on a human ship, where he did not have to be the successor. He could just be Rin, and that knowledge made him stronger than any battle victory ever could. Back on the Odyssey, Jin worked in his lab. The plants grew as they always did. Nothing had changed for him, and yet everything had. He was still a quiet man who liked quiet things. But he was now also the man who had, without even trying, changed the fate of 2 species. Min visited him sometimes. She would bring him tea and they would sit among the plants. They did not talk about what happened very much. They did not need to. They both knew. One day, Min looked at Jin and smiled a little. "You know," she said, "they are talking about you on the Zarathi homeworld. They call you the keeper of the quiet place." Jin looked up from a delicate purple flower he was tending. He seemed surprised. Then he gave a small shrug and went back to his work. "It was just a quiet place," he said simply. "Everyone needs one of those." And that was the lesson the Zarathi learned from humanity. It was not a lesson about weapons or technology. It was a lesson about peace. They had come to the humans expecting to find weak creatures they could dominate. Instead, they found a different kind of power. They found the strength to be gentle. They found the courage to be kind. The alliance between humans and Zarathi grew stronger than anyone had thought possible. They became true partners, and sometimes on the Zarathi ships the crews would build a small room. They would fill it with green plants from Earth and soft lights. They would call it the sanctuary, and in there, even the fiercest Zarathi warrior could go to sit for a while, to remember that even the strongest being in the universe sometimes needs a place to rest. And it all started when a lost successor was found, not in a place of power but resting on the boots of a simple human.